I'm Marisol, 32, and I've spent my entire life trying to earn my mother Eleanor's love. For years, I financially supported her despite the emotional abuse she inflicted. But on my last birthday, when she spat the words, "The best gift would be if you just died," at me, something finally broke. After decades of manipulation and cruelty, I made the decision to cancel all her funding. That choice shattered her world, but ultimately saved mine. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors and supporters. Comment below if you've ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being. Your stories help others feel less alone. Growing up in a modest brick townhouse in Boston's Dorchester neighborhood, I learned early that my mother Eleanor's love was conditional at best and non-existent at worst. Our home looked normal from the outside. Tidy lawn curtains, always perfectly drawn holiday decorations right on schedule. But inside those walls, I navigated an emotional minefield every day. My father walked out when I was 5, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note and the faint scent of his cologne that lingered in the closet for months afterward. I have few memories of him, just fragments of a deep laugh and large hands that would toss me into the air. Eleanor never kept photos of him, so his features have faded in my mind, replaced by the constant reminder that I had his eyes, his smile, his temperament, all things my mother seemed to despise. "You look more like him every day," she would say, her lips curling with disgust as she studied my face. Same selfish expression, same useless dreams. As a child, I didn't understand that Eleanor was transferring her rage toward my father onto me. I only knew that nothing I did seemed good enough to make her happy. When I brought home an A on my spelling test, she would ask why it wasn't an A+. When I carefully saved my allowance to buy her a birthday present, she criticized my choice and left it unused in a drawer. The first school play I performed in was a production of Charlotte's Web when I was 7. I played the role of Fern and practiced my lines for weeks, excited that my mother would see me on stage. The night of the performance, I peeked through the curtains, scanning the audience for her face among the sea of proud parents. She never showed. When I came home still in costume, she was watching television with a glass of wine. "Did you forget about my play?" I asked, tears threatening to spill. She didn't even look away from the screen. "I had a headache. Besides, those school productions are always terrible. You're not missing anything by not having me there." But I was missing everything. My cousin Bella's mother attended every event, cheering loudly and taking photos. My neighbor Tommy's parents created elaborate scrapbooks of his achievements. Meanwhile, Eleanor couldn't be bothered to walk 3 blocks to see me perform. As I grew older, the comparisons to others became Eleanor's weapon of choice. "Why can't you be more like Jessica?" she would ask, referring to the daughter of her coworker. "She's already taking advanced classes and she doesn't talk back." Or, "Bella is so pretty with her blonde hair. If only you hadn't gotten your father's coloring, you might have had a chance." These constant comparisons chipped away at my self-esteem until I began to see myself through her critical lens, always lacking, always falling short. I developed the habit of apologizing for my existence, prefacing my needs with, "I'm sorry, but," and flinching whenever someone raised their voice. School became my sanctuary. There, at least, effort was rewarded with concrete results. I threw myself into academics, staying late to work on projects, and joining every club that would have me. My teachers praised my dedication, unaware that I was desperately trying to achieve enough to make my mother proud. In 6th grade, I won the regional science fair with a project on alternative energy sources. When the principal called my name, I clutched my display board and walked to the stage, scanning the audience once again for Eleanor. This time, to my surprise, she was there sitting in the back row with her arms crossed. Later, as other parents congratulated me, Eleanor stood by, nodding and smiling. "I always encouraged her interest in science," she told my teacher. "We do experiments at home all the time." It was the first of many lies she would tell to associate herself with my accomplishments while taking no actual interest in my development. At home that night, she placed my trophy on the mantel and took a photo of it for Facebook. "So proud of my brilliant daughter," she captioned it. The validation I'd craved for so long made my heart soar, even though I knew the reality behind the facade. The only person who saw through Eleanor's performance was my grandmother, her mother, who lived across town in a small apartment filled with plants and books. Grandma Rose was everything Eleanor was not: warm, encouraging, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. "Your mother loves you in her own way," Grandma Rose would say when I confided in her. "She just doesn't know how to show it properly. Some people aren't meant to be parents, but that's not your burden to carry." Every Sunday, I would take the bus to Grandma Rose's apartment, where she would teach me to bake cookies, help with my homework, or simply listen as I talked about my week. Those hours were precious islands of normalcy in the sea of walking on eggshells that was my life with Eleanor. When I turned 12, Grandma Rose gave me a journal with a small lock and key. "Write down your thoughts here," she said. "Your feelings are valid even when others try to tell you they're not." That journal became my confidant, the place where I could express the confusion, hurt, and anger that I wasn't allowed to show at home. I filled page after page with incidents, conversations, and the constant sense that something was fundamentally wrong with me. Why else would my own mother seem to hate me? When I was 16, Grandma Rose was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. Within 3 months, she was gone. At the funeral, Eleanor sobbed dramatically, accepting condolences from friends and family while I stood silent, my grief too deep for public display. That night, searching for comfort, I asked Eleanor if she would look through some photo albums with me, hoping to share memories of Grandma Rose. "Don't be so sentimental," she snapped. "She's gone, and crying about it won't bring her back. You need to toughen up, Marisol. The world doesn't care about your feelings." With Grandma Rose's death, I lost my only ally, my one source of unconditional love. The next 2 years stretched before me like a prison sentence. I needed to survive living with Eleanor until I could escape to college. I doubled down on my studies, earning perfect grades and scoring high on standardized tests. I joined the robotics team and helped lead them to the state championship. I volunteered at the local library, partly because it looked good on college applications, but mostly because it gave me legitimate reasons to be away from home. The day my acceptance letter from Northwestern University arrived with a full academic scholarship was the first time I felt genuine hope for my future. I had done it. I had earned my ticket out of Eleanor's house, away from the constant criticism and emotional manipulation. When I showed Eleanor the letter, her reaction was predictable. "Chicago. That's so far away. Who's going to help me around the house? You know my back has been bothering me." Her voice took on the martyred tone I knew so well. "I guess I'll just have to manage on my own like I always do." The guilt trip was familiar territory, but this time I had something stronger than guilt propelling me forward: the promise of freedom. "I've earned this opportunity," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm going." Eleanor didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that, creating a tense silence in our small house. But for once, her silent treatment felt like a gift rather than a punishment. In the quiet, I began to pack my life into boxes, each one a step closer to breaking free from her emotional prison. As I prepared to leave for college that August, I couldn't know that while I was physically escaping Eleanor's house, the invisible chains of guilt and obligation would follow me across state lines, stretching but never quite breaking, until the day she told me she wished I was dead. The Northwestern University campus sprawled before me like something from a movie. Gothic buildings covered in ivy, expansive green lawns dotted with students reading under trees, and Lake Michigan glittering in the distance. After the claustrophobia of life with Eleanor, the open space felt like I could finally breathe. My dorm room was small, but represented a freedom I'd never known. I could decorate the walls without criticism. I could study without being interrupted by demands to help around the house. I could exist without constantly monitoring someone else's unpredictable moods. My roommate Jasmine was from Seattle, a cheerful art major with bright blue hair and a contagious laugh. The first night, as we arranged our sides of the room, She noticed me apologizing for taking up too much space in our shared closet. "Hey," she said gently, "you don't need to apologize. This is your space too." It was such a simple statement, but it nearly brought me to tears. The concept that I had a right to exist in a space that my presence wasn't an inconvenience, these were foreign ideas after years of Eleanor's conditioning. Those first few weeks of college were disorienting in the best possible way. Professors valued my input in class discussions. Fellow students invited me to study groups and parties. Residence advisors checked in to make sure I was adjusting well. This steady stream of positive interactions was so different from what I was used to that I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to reveal that it was all a mistake and I didn't belong there after all. I called Eleanor once a week out of obligation. Our conversations followed a predictable pattern. She would complain about her job at the insurance company detail, her various health concerns, and remind me how difficult her life was without me there to help. "The garbage disposal is broken," she said during one call. "I'll probably have to eat out every night since I can't cook properly." "Have you called a plumber?" I asked. "You know I can't afford that on my salary," she replied, though I knew her income was more than adequate for basic repairs. "I guess I'll just have to manage." The familiar weight of guilt settled on my shoulders, but being 1,000 miles away made it easier to resist the urge to solve her problems. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. I hope you can get it fixed soon." As the semester progressed, I discovered an unexpected passion for computer science. My introduction to programming class clicked with my analytical mind in a way nothing else had before. Writing code felt like creating order from chaos, defining clear rules and expectations, unlike the constantly shifting goalposts of Eleanor's approval. I began spending hours in the computer lab, losing track of time as I worked on projects beyond the course requirements. My professor, Dr. Abernathy, took notice and suggested I consider majoring in the field. "You have a natural aptitude for this," she told me after I debugged a particularly tricky program. "The industry needs more women with your skills." The validation from someone I respected was intoxicating. I declared my major in computer science by the end of freshman year, joining a small but growing cohort of women in the program. We formed study groups and supported each other through challenging coursework, creating a community I'd never experienced before. Meanwhile, my relationship with Eleanor evolved into a long-distance version of our previous dynamic. Her calls became less frequent when she realized I wasn't rushing home to solve her problems, but they increased in intensity, each conversation laden with guilt tactics about my abandonment. "I had to ask the neighbors to help me move the sofa," she would say. "If you were here, I wouldn't have to bother other people." Or, "I spent Thanksgiving alone just watching TV. But don't worry about me. I'm used to being by myself now." Each call left me emotionally drained, but the physical distance allowed me to begin recognizing patterns I hadn't been able to see when I was immersed in them daily. I started to question whether her emergencies were truly emergencies, whether her health concerns were as serious as she claimed, whether her loneliness was a natural consequence of how she treated people. During sophomore year, at Jasmine's gentle urging, I made an appointment with the university's counseling center. The counselor, Dr. Martinez, listened as I hesitantly described my relationship with Eleanor, careful to include qualifiers like, "She did the best she could," and "I know she loves me in her own way." After several sessions, Dr. Martinez introduced a term I'd never heard before: narcissistic parent. "From what you've described," she explained, "your mother exhibits many classic traits of narcissistic personality disorder. The constant criticism, taking credit for your achievements, making everything about her needs, the unpredictable, swinging between ignoring you and demanding your attention, these are typical patterns." She recommended books and resources that described family dynamics so familiar it was like reading my own biography. For the first time, I had language to describe my experiences. I wasn't crazy or ungrateful or too sensitive. I was responding normally to abnormal treatment. With this new framework, I began setting small boundaries with Eleanor. I limited our calls to once every 2 weeks instead of weekly. I stopped rushing to solve her problems remotely. I practiced neutral responses to her guilt trips. "I'm sorry you're having a difficult time," instead of, "What can I do to help?" Each boundary was met with escalating tactics, tearful accusations of abandonment, vague health scares, even calling my friends when I didn't respond quickly enough to her messages. But the distance made it easier to maintain my resolve, and my growing support network helped me recognize when I was being manipulated. By junior year, I had minimized contact with Eleanor to the point where my anxiety levels had dropped significantly. I was excelling academically, maintaining a 3.9 GPA in a challenging program. I had a close circle of friends who understood my background and supported my healing journey. I was even beginning to date occasionally, though. I approached romantic relationships with caution, aware that my concept of love had been warped by my upbringing. The summer before my senior year, I secured an internship at Tech Future, a growing startup in Chicago, developing innovative software solutions for healthcare systems. The work was challenging and fulfilling, combining my technical skills with real-world impact. By the end of the summer, my supervisor pulled me aside. "We'd like to offer you a position after graduation," he said. "You've impressed everyone here with your work ethic and creative problem solving. Starting salary would be $120,000 plus benefits and stock options." I stared at him in disbelief. The amount was more than triple what Eleanor earned annually at her insurance job. Financial independence had always been my goal, but this exceeded my wildest expectations. When I called Eleanor to share the news, her response was immediate and predictable. "Well, aren't you lucky?" she said, her voice tight. "Some people work their whole lives and never make that kind of money. I suppose now you'll be too good to visit your old mother." But then her tone shifted, warming noticeably. "You know, I've been having trouble with the mortgage lately. The interest rate went up and on my salary," and there it was. The first hint of what would become a pattern over the next decade. As soon as money entered the equation, Eleanor's interest in my life suddenly increased. What began as a request for help with a mortgage payment evolved into regular financial support that would grow far beyond anything I could have anticipated. Against my therapist's advice, I sent Eleanor $2,000 that month to help with her mortgage. It was the first transaction in what would become a decade-long drain on my finances and my soul. A futile attempt to purchase the maternal love she was incapable of giving freely. My career after college followed an upward trajectory that even my ambitious younger self couldn't have imagined. I started at Tech Future as promised, quickly establishing myself as a valuable team member who could bridge the gap between technical challenges and practical solutions. My starting salary allowed me to rent a modest but comfortable apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, furnish it with new furniture, no hand-me-downs or thrift store finds, and still save a significant portion of my income each month. Well, I could have saved a significant portion if not for Eleanor. What started as occasional financial assistance to my mother quickly evolved into regular support. The mortgage help became monthly transfers of $3,000, just until I get back on my feet. When I suggested she look for a better-paying job, she claimed various health issues prevented her from working full-time, though she never provided medical documentation, and her social media showed an active social life. By the end of my first year at Tech Future, I had been promoted to senior developer with a substantial raise. I called Eleanor to share the news, hoping for some acknowledgement of my hard work. "That's nice, dear," she said dismissively. "Listen, the roof is leaking and I got a quote for $8,000 to repair it. I don't suppose your fancy new job could help with that." I hesitated, recalling Dr. Martinez's warning about establishing financial boundaries early. "I can contribute some, Mom, but not the full amount. Maybe we could look into home repair loans or—" "Forget it," she cut me off, her voice hardening. "I'll just put buckets under the leaks and hope the ceiling doesn't collapse on me while I sleep. Don't worry about your mother." The familiar guilt wrapped around my chest like a vice. That night I transferred the full $8,000 to her account, telling myself it was a one-time major expense. She called the next day, effusive with gratitude and affection, telling me what a wonderful daughter I was, how she'd always known I would take care of her. Those rare moments of approval were like water in the desert for my approval-starved heart. Even knowing they were transactional, I couldn't help but crave them. As my 20s progressed, my career continued to flourish. I led the development of an innovative patient management system that streamlined healthcare delivery across multiple hospitals. The project earned industry recognition and led to speaking engagements at tech conferences. I published articles in respected journals and mentored junior developers, particularly women entering the field. Meanwhile, Eleanor's financial demands grew proportionally with my income. The monthly transfers increased from $3,000 to $5,000. The emergencies became more frequent. Car repairs, medical bills not covered by the premium insurance I now paid for home renovations that somehow never seemed to improve the property's condition. When I was 26, I flew back to Boston to visit my first trip home in nearly 2 years. Eleanor's house, the same one I'd grown up in, showed little evidence of the repairs and renovations I'd funded. The roof no longer leaked, but the interior was cluttered and neglected. Yet I noticed new designer handbags in her closet, expensive bottles of wine in the kitchen, and receipts from upscale restaurants. When I gently questioned the disparity, Eleanor's warmth instantly vanished. "Are you monitoring how I spend my money now?" she demanded. "After all I sacrificed for you, raising you alone, giving you everything, now you're going to nickel and dime me." "I'm not monitoring you." I backpedaled immediately, the old familiar fear of her displeasure rising in my throat. "I just want to make sure the house is in good condition." "Maybe if you visited more often you'd see the improvements," she sniffed. "But you're too busy with your important job and your important friends to care about your mother." The visit, planned for a week, lasted only 3 days before I made an excuse about work and fled back to Chicago, emotionally exhausted and confused about why I continued to subject myself to her manipulation. My therapist in Chicago, Dr. Brennan, who had taken over my care after college, was direct in her assessment. "You're trying to buy her love," she said during our next session. "But people who commodify love always raise the price. There will never be enough money to make her treat you with the respect and care you deserve." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, I remained trapped in the role of the dutiful daughter, desperate for approval I would never receive. At 28, an unexpected opportunity changed the trajectory of my career. Along with 2 colleagues from Tech Future, I co-founded a startup called MedConnect, developing AI-driven software to improve diagnostic accuracy in rural and underserved medical facilities. We secured significant venture capital funding, allowing me to work full-time on a project I deeply believed in. The 18 months that followed were the most intense and rewarding of my professional life. I worked 16-hour days, pouring everything I had into building something meaningful. Our team expanded from 3 to 20, then to 50. We moved from a cramped co-working space to proper offices overlooking the Chicago River. During this period, my contact with Eleanor became less frequent, not by design, but by necessity. The monthly transfers continued automatically, but I had little time for her lengthy calls detailing grievances and demands. When I did speak with her, she alternated between complaints about my neglect and thinly veiled suggestions that as a successful businesswoman, I should be doing more for her financially. Just before my 30th birthday, MedConnect was acquired by a major healthcare technology corporation for $28 million. As a co-founder with substantial equity, my share after taxes was just over $7 million, a life-changing sum that both exhilarated and terrified me. I told no one about the acquisition at first, not even Eleanor. I needed time to process this new reality and make thoughtful decisions about my future. I took a 2-week vacation, my first in years, to a small beach town in Mexico where no one knew me. There, sitting on the sand, watching waves crash against the shore, I contemplated what I truly wanted from life. Financial security had been my primary goal for so long. A reaction to the scarcity mindset instilled by Eleanor's constant money worries, many of which I now realized had been largely manufactured. With that goal achieved beyond my wildest expectations, what did I want next? The answer came with surprising clarity: peace. Freedom from the constant drain of Eleanor's emotional and financial demands. Space to build healthy relationships. Maybe eventually a family of my own, one based on mutual respect and genuine love, rather than obligation and manipulation. Upon returning to Chicago, I met with a financial advisor who helped me create a comprehensive plan for my newfound wealth. Most went into diversified investments for long-term growth. Some was set aside for a comfortable but not extravagant condo in a neighborhood I loved. And yes, a portion was allocated to support Eleanor, not the open-ended drain that had characterized the past years, but a structured trust that would provide for her needs without enabling excessive spending. When I finally told Eleanor about the acquisition and my new financial situation, her reaction was exactly as I had anticipated. "My baby is a millionaire," she crowed, her voice dripping with a pride she had never shown in my actual work. "I always knew you were special. Always told everyone my daughter would be successful someday." Before I could respond, she continued, "You know I've been thinking about moving. This old house has too many stairs for my knees. There's a beautiful condo building downtown with a doorman and a pool. Only $800,000. A drop in the bucket for you now." The old Marisol would have transferred the money immediately, desperate to maintain the rare warmth in Eleanor's voice. The new Marisol, tempered by therapy and hard-won insights, took a different approach. "I've actually set up a trust for you," I explained. "It will cover your living expenses, healthcare, and reasonable housing costs. The trustees will manage the payments directly." There was a long silence on the phone. "A trust," Eleanor finally said, her voice hardening. "Like I'm some child who can't handle my own money after everything I've done for you." "It's not about that," I tried to explain. "It's a secure way to ensure you're taken care of for life." "Taken care of or controlled," she snapped. "I don't need your charity with strings attached." The conversation devolved from there, ending with Eleanor hanging up on me after declaring I was just like my father, selfish and controlling. She didn't call me for 2 weeks, the longest we'd gone without contact in years. When she did call again, her tone had shifted dramatically. She was apologetic, understanding, even grateful for the trust arrangement. The sudden change in attitude should have been a red flag, but I was so relieved to avoid conflict that I accepted the peace offering without question. Over the next 2 years, Eleanor's financial demands actually increased despite the trust. There were always special circumstances, exceptions, emergencies that the trust supposedly couldn't cover quickly enough. The trustees, professional financial managers I had hired specifically to create a buffer between Eleanor's demands and my guilt, reported frequent aggressive calls from her attempting to circumvent the established guidelines. Meanwhile, I had settled into a new rhythm post-acquisition. I stayed with the company that had purchased MedConnect as a senior technical advisor, working reasonable hours for the first time in years. I renovated my condo, took up yoga and painting, and slowly began to build a life centered around my own needs and interests rather than Eleanor's demands. I also met Michael, a software engineer who had recently moved to Chicago from Portland. We connected at a tech meetup where I was speaking about ethical considerations in medical AI. He asked thoughtful questions, made me laugh with his dry wit, and looked at me with a kind of attentiveness I wasn't accustomed to. Our relationship developed slowly, both of us cautious after previous disappointments. He was patient with my trust issues, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. When I finally told him about Eleanor after 3 months of dating, his response was validating in a way few had been before. "That's not love," he said simply. "What she's doing, that's not what a parent's love should look like." As our relationship deepened, Michael began to notice patterns I had normalized. How my mood would crash after calls with Eleanor, how I would become anxious and apologetic after spending money on myself, how I would flinch slightly when someone raised their voice in excitement. "You deserve better," he would tell me gently. "You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, especially by family." With Michael's steady support and continued therapy, I began to establish firmer boundaries with Eleanor. I limited our calls to once a week with a clear end time. I stopped responding to late-night emergency texts until morning. I declined to provide funds beyond what the trust allocated. Each boundary was met with escalating manipulation tactics. Eleanor called Michael's parents, whom she had met only once at a holiday dinner, to complain that I was abandoning her. She contacted my former college roommate Jasmine through Facebook, claiming she was worried about my mental state. She even called my office once, telling my assistant she was having a medical emergency and needed to reach me immediately. When I called back in a panic, she wanted to discuss redecorating her living room. As my 32nd birthday approached, I felt stronger and more centered than I had in years. Michael and I had moved in together, merging our lives with surprising ease. My work continued to be fulfilling, and I had started mentoring young women from disadvantaged backgrounds who were interested in tech careers. The day before my birthday, I received an elaborate flower arrangement at my office with a card from Eleanor. To my wonderful daughter on her special day, all my love, Mom. The public display of affection, witnessed by my colleagues who knew little about my complicated relationship with my mother, was typical Eleanor. She excelled at grand gestures that created the appearance of a loving relationship, while the private reality remained toxic. That evening, Michael had planned a small dinner with close friends to celebrate my birthday. As we were getting ready to leave, Eleanor called. I put the phone on speaker as I finished applying my makeup, expecting a brief birthday wish. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Thanks for the flowers. They're beautiful." "Well, someone should remember your birthday," she replied. "You certainly don't make time to celebrate with your mother anymore." I sighed, catching Michael's eye in the mirror. He gave me an encouraging nod. "Actually, I suggested coming to visit next month, but you said you had your garden club retreat," I reminded her. "That's not until the end of the month," she countered. "You could have come earlier, but I suppose your friends are more important than family." "Mom, it's not about importance. It's about scheduling. Anyway, Michael has arranged a small dinner tonight with—" "Michael," she interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "Always Michael. He's turned you against me, hasn't he?" "No one has turned me against you," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "I'm trying to have a healthy relationship with both of you." "Healthy, is that what your therapist calls it when you abandon your mother? When you control my finances like I'm some irresponsible child?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, it's my birthday. I was hoping we could just have a nice conversation without this turning into an argument." "Your birthday?" she scoffed. "Always about you, isn't it? Do you ever think about what I might need? The roof is leaking again, and that useless trust of yours won't approve the repairs until next month." "The trustees require estimates from licensed contractors," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "Once you provide those—" "I shouldn't have to jump through hoops to fix my own house," she shouted. "A house I raised you in, sacrificing everything for your benefit." Michael moved closer, his hand on my shoulder in silent support. I caught his eye in the mirror again, drawing strength from his presence. "Mom, I understand you're frustrated, but the trust is set up to provide for your needs while ensuring the money is used appropriately. The trustees are just doing their job. Their job is to control me just like you're trying to control me. You've always been ungrateful, Marisol, always thinking you're better than me with your fancy degree and your fancy job." The familiar accusations washed over me, but this time, instead of the usual hurt and guilt, I felt a strange calm. These words had lost their power through repetition and my growing understanding of the dynamic between us. "I'm not trying to control you," I said evenly. "I'm trying to help you while also maintaining healthy boundaries." "Boundaries?" She spat the word like it was poison. "That's therapist talk for being selfish. You know what? If you want to give me a birthday gift, the best gift would be if you just died. Then at least I could get your money without all these strings attached." The words hung in the air, shocking in their naked cruelty. Michael's hand tightened on my shoulder, and I met his horrified gaze in the mirror. In all our years of conflict, through all the manipulation and emotional abuse, Eleanor had never expressed a wish for my death. Something inside me, the last thread of hope that she might someday be capable of genuine maternal love, snapped cleanly in two. "I need to go now," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call and sat motionless at my vanity, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Eyes clearer, shoulders straighter, as if a heavy burden had suddenly been lifted. "Marisol," Michael said gently, kneeling beside me. "Are you okay?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I think I will be." That night, instead of celebrating with friends as planned, Michael and I stayed home. I called the restaurant to reschedule, explaining that a family emergency had come up. We ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on our balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline as I processed what had happened. "She wishes I was dead," I said, still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of those words. "My own mother would prefer me dead if it meant getting access to my money." Michael didn't offer platitudes or try to minimize the statement. He simply held my hand and listened as I worked through the implications. "You know what's strange?" I continued. "I feel sad, but I also feel free, like I've been given permission to stop trying, to stop hoping that someday, if I just do enough or give enough, she'll actually love me." As the city lights twinkled below us and my 32nd birthday slipped away, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. It was time to stop funding the person who wished me dead. The week following my birthday passed in a blur of intense emotion and clarity. I took time off work, something I rarely did, and focused entirely on processing what had happened and deciding my next steps. Michael was my rock throughout this period, offering support without pushing me toward any particular decision. "This is your journey," he said. "I'll back whatever choice you make, but it has to be your choice." I spent hours in session with Dr. Brennan unraveling the complex emotions triggered by Eleanor's statement. "The best gift would be if you just died," played on repeat in my mind, each iteration stripping away another layer of the guilt and obligation that had defined our relationship for decades. "What she said was unforgivable," Dr. Brennan acknowledged during one particularly intense session. "But in a way, it's also clarifying. There's no ambiguity here. No room for rationalization. She's shown you exactly who she is and what she values." "The money," I said quietly. "She values the money, not me." "Yes," Dr. Brennan agreed. "And now you have a choice about how to respond to that truth." I also consulted with my financial advisor, James Feldman, who had helped establish Eleanor's trust 2 years earlier. I explained the situation and asked for a complete accounting of my financial support over the years. The numbers were staggering. In the decade since I'd graduated college, I had given Eleanor over $750,000 in direct transfers, plus another $200,000 through the trust. Nearly $1 million, and none of it had bought what I truly wanted: her love and approval. "The trust is legally binding," James explained, "but it does include provisions for modifying or terminating support in certain circumstances. Given what's happened, you have grounds to make significant changes." "What would that process look like?" I asked. "We'd need to document the reason for modification, prepare the necessary legal paperwork, and provide proper notice to all parties. I can coordinate with the trustees and our legal team." I nodded, still processing. "And what about the house?" "The property is in your name as you purchased it outright for her use. You have complete legal right to determine its disposition." This fact had always been a point of contention with Eleanor, who believed the house should have been transferred to her name despite contributing nothing to its purchase. The property, worth about $400,000, represented the largest single asset in my support package for her. "I need time to think," I told James. "Can you prepare the paperwork for various scenarios so I can review my options?" "Of course," he agreed. "Take whatever time you need. These are significant decisions." Throughout the week, I also spoke with my closest friends, people who knew the true nature of my relationship with Eleanor and could offer perspective untainted by her manipulation. Jasmine, still my best friend after all these years, flew in from Seattle to spend the weekend with me. "I've watched this relationship drain you for over a decade," she said as we walked along Lake Michigan. "Every time she calls, it's like watching someone slowly deflate a balloon. You get smaller, quieter, less confident." I kept hoping she would change, I admitted. That if I just gave enough, did enough, she would finally see me, really see me, and be proud of me. "Some people aren't capable of that kind of love," Jasmine said gently. "It's not because you're unlovable. It's because they're broken in ways that have nothing to do with you." By the end of the week, I had reached a decision. It wasn't made in anger or as punishment, but as an act of self-preservation and, strangely enough, compassion, both for myself and for Eleanor. I called a meeting with James, the trustees, and Eleanor for the following Monday. I requested that it take place at a neutral location, a conference room at James's office rather than Eleanor's house or my condo. I wanted the conversation to be professional and controlled, minimizing the opportunity for emotional manipulation. Eleanor was suspicious of the formal setting but agreed to attend. I asked her to come alone, though I half expected her to bring someone, a friend, a neighbor, anyone who might serve as an ally in whatever she imagined was about to happen. To my surprise, she arrived on time and unaccompanied. At 63, Eleanor still maintained the carefully curated appearance that had always been important to her. Hair freshly colored and styled makeup, precisely applied clothing, expensive but not flashy. Only the deep lines around her mouth and between her eyebrows betrayed the habitual discontent that had characterized most of her life. "Marisol," she said coolly as she entered the conference room. Her eyes swept over James and the two trustees before returning to me. "Quite the formal reception committee. Is all this really necessary?" "I think it is," I replied, gesturing to a chair across from me. "Please have a seat." Once everyone was settled, James opened the meeting with a brief overview of the trust's current status and my history of financial support. Eleanor listened with growing impatience, drumming her manicured nails on the polished table. "I'm familiar with the arrangements," she interrupted. "Is there a point to this recitation?" "There is," I said, taking a deep breath. "Mom, I've made a decision about our financial relationship going forward." Her posture stiffened slightly, but her expression remained neutral. "And what might that be?" "I'm terminating the trust and ending my financial support," I said, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "Effective immediately." The words hung in the air between us. Eleanor's face remained frozen for a moment, as if she hadn't quite processed what I'd said. Then her expression shifted through a series of emotions: disbelief, anger, calculation, and finally a practiced vulnerability that I recognized from countless previous confrontations. "Marisol," she said, her voice softening to the wounded tone she employed when direct aggression wasn't working. "I don't understand. Is this because of our little disagreement on your birthday? You know I didn't mean what I said. I was upset and spoke without thinking." "It wasn't a disagreement," I corrected gently. "You said you wished I was dead so you could get my money without strings attached. Those were your exact words." She waved a dismissive hand. "Everyone says things they don't mean when they're angry. You're going to punish your mother over one thoughtless comment." "This isn't punishment," I explained. "This is me recognizing that our relationship has become unhealthy and transactional. The financial support isn't helping either of us. It's enabling patterns that hurt us both." Eleanor's vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold fury. "So you're cutting me off, after everything I've done for you, after raising you alone when your father abandoned us, after sacrificing my own dreams so you could pursue yours." I had anticipated this response, the immediate pivot to guilt and obligation. In the past, it would have worked. Today, it simply confirmed that I was making the right decision. "I'm grateful for the sacrifices you made," I said sincerely. "And I've spent the last decade trying to repay that debt many times over. But a parent's love shouldn't come with a perpetual invoice attached." "This is about Michael, isn't it?" she demanded, changing tactics. "He's turned you against me. He wants all your money for himself." "Michael has nothing to do with this decision," I replied. "In fact, he's encouraged me to make whatever choice feels right to me, even if that meant continuing to support you." One of the trustees, Ms. Chen, gently interjected at this point with practical details. "Mrs. Reyes, we've prepared information about the transition. The trust will provide 3 months of continued support at the current level to allow you time to adjust your financial situation. You'll also receive a one-time severance payment of $50,000. Eleanor ignored her, completely focusing her attention on me. "And the house? Are you throwing me out on the street too?" "No," I said. "You can continue to live in the house, but ownership will transfer to you. You'll be responsible for taxes, insurance, and maintenance going forward." This was actually quite generous, giving her full ownership of a property worth $400,000 that she had contributed nothing toward. But I wanted a clean break, not an ongoing point of connection through property management. "How am I supposed to afford the taxes on my pension?" she demanded. "The house is fully paid for," James pointed out. "Many people in your age bracket live comfortably on similar incomes without additional support." Eleanor turned to him with a venomous glare. "No one asked for your input." She returned her attention to me, her expression calculating once more. "If this is about more control, I can work with the trustees. Follow whatever rules you want to set up. You don't need to go to this extreme." "This isn't about control," I said. "It's about recognizing that money has poisoned our relationship. Maybe without it between us, we can build something healthier." She laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "So this is for my benefit. How generous of you." "It's for both of us," I said. "I've spent years trying to buy your approval and love. You've spent years resenting me while taking my money. Neither of us is happy with this arrangement." "Speak for yourself," she snapped. "I was perfectly fine until you decided to play goddess with my life." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes with Eleanor cycling through various strategies: anger, guilt, bargaining threats, and even brief moments of seeming acceptance that I recognized as tactical retreats rather than genuine understanding. The trustees and James handled the practical details professionally, presenting Eleanor with the necessary paperwork and explaining the transition timeline. When all the documents had been reviewed and signed, Eleanor stood abruptly. "I hope you're satisfied, Marisol. You've finally become exactly like your father, selfish, cold, and cruel. The accusation would have devastated me once. Now I recognized it for what it was, a last-ditch effort to wound me into changing my mind. I'm sorry you feel that way," I said simply. "I hope that someday we can have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation." She gathered her papers and purse, pausing at the door for what she clearly intended as a parting shot. "Don't expect me to be there when this blows up your relationship with Michael. Men always leave when the going gets tough, just like your father did." After she left the room, fell silent. James and the trustees exchanged glances before James spoke. "That went about as well as could be expected. Are you okay, Marisol?" I took a moment to check in with myself. My hands were steady, my breathing normal. The anxiety that usually accompanied confrontations with Eleanor was noticeably absent. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Actually, I feel lighter." As I left the office building and stepped into the bright Chicago afternoon, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The guilt and obligation that had been my constant companions for decades had loosened their grip. I wasn't naive enough to think Eleanor would accept this change without a fight. But for the first time, I felt equipped to handle whatever came next. That evening when Michael returned from work, I told him about the meeting. "How do you feel?" he asked, his primary concern, as always, being my emotional well-being rather than the financial implications. "Free?" I said, the word catching slightly in my throat. "Sad but free." He pulled me into a gentle embrace. "I'm proud of you. That took incredible courage." As we stood there in our kitchen arms wrapped around each other, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Eleanor would not simply accept this new reality without attempting to overturn it. But I had finally chosen myself, my well-being, my future, and that choice, however difficult, felt unequivocally right. In the days following the meeting, Eleanor launched what I came to think of as her shock and awe campaign. The first wave began with calls, dozens of them at all hours of the day and night. When I didn't answer, she left voicemails ranging from tearful pleas to vicious accusations. "Marisol, please call me back. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We need to talk. How dare you ignore me after what you've done, you ungrateful, selfish child. I'm not feeling well. My blood pressure is through the roof because of the stress you've caused. If anything happens to me, it will be your fault." When the calls proved ineffective, she moved to text messages, emails, and even handwritten letters delivered to both my office and home. The content varied but followed predictable patterns: guilt threats, manipulative expressions of concern for my mental health, and occasional moments of seemingly genuine remorse that I now recognized as tactical rather than sincere. I maintained no contact, a strategy Dr. Brennan had suggested might be necessary during the initial adjustment period. "Think of it as detox," she explained, "both for you and for her. As long as communication continues, so will the unhealthy patterns." The second wave of Eleanor's campaign involved mutual acquaintances and family members. She contacted my cousin Rachel, my former neighbors in Boston, even colleagues whose names she had gleaned from my social media profiles. Each received a carefully crafted version of events casting Eleanor as the abandoned, mistreated mother and me as the heartless daughter who had cut her off without warning or justification. Some believed her narrative without question and reached out to express their disappointment in me. Others, particularly those who had witnessed our dynamic firsthand over the years, were more skeptical and contacted me directly to understand the situation. My cousin Rachel called on a Sunday afternoon, her voice cautious. "Marisol, I just got the strangest call from Aunt Eleanor. She says you've abandoned her and left her destitute. That doesn't sound like you at all." I explained the situation as objectively as I could, including the "best gift would be if you died" comment and the decade of financial support I had provided. "That makes more sense," Rachel sighed. "Honestly, I've watched this pattern with her for years, not just with you, but with everyone. My mom dealt with similar manipulation when they were younger. Nothing was ever enough, and everything came with strings attached." Her validation was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Having family members who understood and supported my decision helped counter the narrative Eleanor was spreading in our extended circle. The third wave of Eleanor's campaign was perhaps the most predictable. She escalated to public forums. She created posts on social media detailing her version of events, carefully crafted to generate maximum sympathy without crossing into obvious falsehood. She joined support groups for parents estranged from ungrateful children and shared selective details of our story. "My daughter made millions in tech and now refuses to help her widowed mother," she wrote in one particularly effective post that was shared hundreds of times. "I sacrificed everything for her education, and this is how she repays me." The public nature of these attacks was painful, but I resisted the urge to respond or correct the record. Engaging would only feed the dynamic I was trying to break. Throughout this period, I maintained the boundaries I had established. The trustees handled the practical aspects of the transition, including transferring the house title to Eleanor's name. The 3 months of continued support proceeded as planned, giving her time to adjust her finances accordingly. The one-time payment of $50,000 was deposited into her account. Meanwhile, I focused on healing and rebuilding. I continued regular therapy sessions, exploring the deeply ingrained patterns that had shaped my relationship with Eleanor and working to replace them with healthier expectations and boundaries. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the years when Eleanor's demands consumed so much of my emotional energy. I invested more fully in my relationship with Michael, allowing myself to be vulnerable in ways I had previously feared. 6 months after the meeting that changed everything, the storms had largely subsided. Eleanor's campaign had run its course, yielding diminishing returns as people tired of the drama or saw through the manipulation. The financial transition was complete, with all legal obligations fulfilled and documented. I received occasional updates about Eleanor through mutual connections. After initial resistance, she had found part-time work at a local boutique, her first employment in years. She had downsized her lifestyle somewhat, though the house and severance payment provided significant security. She continued to portray herself as the victim of my cruelty, but the intensity had diminished as new dramas and interests captured her attention. As for me, the changes were profound. The constant background anxiety that had accompanied me for decades, the fear of Eleanor's disapproval, the guilt over never doing enough, the dread of her next demand, had faded to a manageable whisper. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I made decisions based on my own values and desires, rather than anticipating Eleanor's reaction. I also redirected the funds that had previously gone to Eleanor's support. Some went to therapy and self-care practices that helped me continue healing. Some was invested for future security. But the largest portion I channeled into a foundation supporting young people from dysfunctional homes, providing scholarships, mentorship, and mental health resources to help break cycles of abuse and dependency. My relationship with Michael deepened during this period of transformation. He witnessed my journey with unwavering support, never imposing his opinions, but offering steady presence as I navigated the complex emotions of setting boundaries with Eleanor. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset over the Chicago skyline, "about us, about the future." My heart quickened. "What about it?" He took my hand, his expression serious but warm. "I love you, Marisol. I love your strength, your kindness, your resilience. I love the way you're breaking patterns and choosing a healthier path. I want to build a life with you, a life based on mutual respect and genuine love." "Are you proposing?" I asked, hardly daring to believe what was happening. He smiled, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small velvet box. "I am. Will you marry me?" The ring inside was perfect. Not ostentatious or showy, but elegant and unique, just like our relationship. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. "Absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt a momentary pang, not of doubt about my decision to marry Michael, but of sadness that my own mother might not be part of this significant life event. Despite everything, some small part of me still wished for the mother-daughter relationship I had never had. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked, noticing the shift in my expression. "Just processing," I admitted. "I'm so happy about us. But there's still grief about Eleanor, about what could have been, but never was." He nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. "That grief is valid. It doesn't diminish what we have." In the weeks that followed, as we began planning our wedding, I wrestled with the question of whether to invite Eleanor. Dr. Brennan helped me explore the pros and cons, focusing on what would support my healing rather than what societal expectations might dictate. "There's no right or wrong answer here," she assured me. "The question is what serves your well-being and the healthy relationship you're building with Michael." After much reflection, I decided not to extend an invitation. The likelihood of Eleanor using the wedding as an opportunity to create drama or attempt to reestablish unhealthy patterns was too high. Our healing, both individually and as a family system, was still too fragile to withstand such a test. Instead, we planned an intimate ceremony with friends and family members who genuinely supported our relationship. Rachel would attend along with a few other relatives who understood the complexity of my relationship with Eleanor. Jasmine would be my maid of honor, and Michael's brother would serve as best man. As the wedding approached, I continued to receive updates about Eleanor through mutual connections. She had apparently begun dating a retired accountant from her neighborhood. She spoke less frequently about me to others, finding new sources of identity and attention. In a strange way, the severance of our financial relationship seemed to have pushed her toward greater independence and new connections, an unintended but positive consequence. 1 year after the meeting that changed everything, I sat in Dr. Brennan's office for what we had decided would be our final regular session. We would check in occasionally, but both agreed I had reached a place of stability and health that no longer required weekly therapy. "How would you describe the changes in your life since you set that boundary with Eleanor?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. It's like I've been carrying a heavy backpack my entire life, so long that I didn't even realize how much it was weighing me down. Setting that boundary was like finally taking off the backpack. There was some soreness, some adjustment to moving without that familiar weight. But ultimately, I can stand taller, move more freely, breathe more deeply. Dr. Brennan smiled. "That's a beautiful metaphor. And your relationship with Eleanor now?" "We have no direct contact," I said. "I hear about her occasionally through others. I've accepted that she may never be capable of the kind of healthy relationship I wanted. And that's okay. I've stopped trying to earn love from someone who can't give it freely." "And what about the guilt, the obligation you felt for so long?" I smiled, recognizing how far I'd come. It still whispers sometimes, especially when I hear she's telling people she struggles financially. But then I remember that I gave her a house, a substantial cash payment, and a decade of generous support. I fulfilled any obligation many times over. What she wanted wasn't support. It was control and endless resources without accountability. As our session ended, Dr. Brennan offered a final observation that stayed with me long afterward. What's remarkable about your journey, Marisol, is that you didn't just set a boundary with Eleanor. You fundamentally changed your relationship with yourself. You decided you were worthy of respect, worthy of peace, worthy of love without conditions. That's the most important boundary of all. Walking out of her office into the bright spring afternoon, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead wasn't perfect or without challenges, but it was mine to walk on my own terms, unburdened by the toxic patterns of the past. Eleanor had once said the best gift would be if I died. In a way, something had died. The version of myself that accepted mistreatment as my due, that believed love had to be purchased, that sacrificed my well-being on the altar of an obligation that could never be fulfilled. In its place, something new had been born. A woman who understood her worth, who set healthy boundaries, who recognized that genuine love uplifts rather than diminishes. This rebirth was indeed a gift not to Eleanor, but to myself and to all those who would benefit from the healthier relationships I could now build. As I prepared to marry Michael, and perhaps someday start a family of our own, I carried forward a commitment to break the generational patterns of toxic love and conditional acceptance. If we had children, they would grow up knowing they were valued for who they were, not what they could provide. They would learn that boundaries are acts of love, not rejection. They would understand that their worth was inherent, not earned through performance or compliance. That was the true gift. Not death, but transformation. Not endings, but new beginnings built on firmer foundations. 5 years have passed since I made the decision to cancel Eleanor's funding, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined. Michael and I have been married for 4 years now, sharing a renovated brownstone in Chicago's Lincoln Park, with our 2-year-old daughter, Rosa, named after my grandmother who showed me what unconditional love truly looks like. Our home is filled with laughter, honest communication, and the kind of security I never experienced as a child. When Rosa falls, we comfort her instead of telling her to toughen up. When she accomplishes something new, we celebrate her effort rather than taking credit for her achievement. These might seem like small things, but they represent the breaking of patterns that spanned generations in my family. Professionally, I've found a new balance between ambition and well-being. After MedConnect's acquisition, I stayed with the parent company for 2 years before leaving to start a nonprofit organization called Digital Bridges. We provide technology education, mentorship, and mental health support to young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds, helping them build careers in tech while healing from past trauma. The work combines my technical expertise with my personal journey, creating meaning from the pain I experienced. The foundation I established with the funds previously directed to Eleanor has flourished, providing scholarships to dozens of students each year. Many of these young people come from homes with narcissistic or abusive parents, and we offer not just financial support, but also therapy, life skills training, and community. Watching them break free from toxic patterns and build healthy lives brings me profound satisfaction. As for Eleanor, our paths have diverged completely. We haven't spoken directly since that final meeting 5 years ago. Through mutual connections, I've heard that she has adapted to her new financial reality better than I might have expected. The boutique job became full-time, giving her not just income, but also social connections and purpose. Her relationship with the accountant has continued, providing companionship and stability. She still occasionally tells her version of our story to anyone who will listen. The ungrateful daughter who abandoned her mother after making millions. But the audience for these tales has dwindled as she's built a life less dependent on sympathy and victimhood. In a strange way, the boundary I set for my own protection may have ultimately benefited her as well, pushing her toward greater independence and authentic relationships. When Rosa was born, I wrestled with whether to inform Eleanor about her granddaughter. After careful consideration and discussions with Michael and my therapist, I decided that until Eleanor could demonstrate fundamental changes in her behavior and thinking, introducing her to Rosa would risk exposing my daughter to the same toxic patterns I had worked so hard to escape. This decision wasn't about punishment but protection, creating a safe, loving environment for Rosa to thrive without the manipulation and conditional love that had characterized my own childhood. If someday Eleanor shows genuine transformation and the capacity for healthy relationships, the door may open to carefully supervised contact. But I no longer feel guilty about prioritizing my daughter's emotional well-being over societal expectations about family relationships. The journey of healing continues daily. There are still moments when I catch myself falling into old patterns, apologizing unnecessarily, questioning my worth, flinching at perceived criticism. But now I recognize these reactions for what they are, echoes of old wounds rather than reflections of my current reality. With each recognition comes the opportunity to choose a different response to rewrite the neural pathways carved by years of conditioning. My relationship with Michael has deepened through the challenges we face together. He has been my steadfast partner in building a life based on mutual respect, open communication, and genuine affection. When conflicts arise, as they do in any relationship, we face them directly, rather than using manipulation or withdrawal. We express needs clearly rather than expecting the other to mind read. We give love freely rather than using it as currency for control. The foundation I created has recently launched a book club focused on literature about family dynamics, boundaries, and healing. At our last meeting, a young woman spoke about her own experience cutting financial ties with manipulative parents. "I felt so guilty at first," she said, tears in her eyes, "like I was abandoning them. But then I realized that money had become a chain binding us in an unhealthy dynamic. Breaking that chain was the only way either of us could grow." Her words resonated deeply with my own experience. The financial support I had provided Eleanor for so many years hadn't been genuine help. It had been a substitute for the emotional connection I craved but couldn't establish. Ending that support wasn't abandonment, but a recognition that true relationship couldn't be purchased at any price. As I look toward the future, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. The hypervigilance that characterized my earlier years, always scanning for threats, always anticipating criticism, always preparing defenses, has largely subsided. In its place is a steady confidence in my own worth and the boundaries I've established to protect it. My story isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing we can do, both for ourselves and for those who harm us, is to stop enabling destructive patterns. It's about understanding that love without respect isn't love at all, but a counterfeit that damages everyone involved. When Eleanor said the best gift would be if I died, she couldn't have known that her cruel words would indeed lead to a kind of death. The death of our toxic relationship, the death of my people-pleasing identity, the death of patterns that had poisoned our family for generations. From that death has come new life, new growth, new possibilities for healing and connection based on healthier foundations. If you're watching this and recognize your own relationship in my story, please know that you deserve love that doesn't hurt, connections that lift you up rather than tear you down, relationships that honor your boundaries rather than trampling them. Setting those boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of courage and self-respect that can ultimately benefit everyone involved. I'd be honored if you'd share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the strength to protect your well-being? If you found this story valuable, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might need to hear that they're not alone in these struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and healing on yours.